Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Katrina Acey, Chair of the Public Disclosure Commission, and I will open our regular meeting for March 24th, 2016. Our first item on the agenda is citizen comments and concerns. I'd love to entertain any comments or concerns from anyone in the audience and not related to any agenda items today. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the commission at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the commissioner comments and concerns. Anything? I just have one quick one. I really want to thank our staff. They've been working extremely hard on so many huge projects. Every single department has just been doing a yeoman's effort, I believe, and it's so easy to overlook because we tend to come across with concerns and, I don't like to say criticisms, but that's our job, and that's what our staff asks us to do, is to tell them where they need to go. And so sometimes you don't get our appreciation, and I want to tell you it's there from all of us. We appreciate everything all the staff is doing, all the way down to whoever cleans the kitchen sink. I appreciate it. Thank you.
But we have a process improvement for the sink.
Yes. Yes. Next item on the agenda is our minutes, and I would accept a motion to approve the February 25th, 2016 regular commission meeting minutes. It's been moved and seconded to approve the February 25th, 2016 regular commission meeting minutes. Any further comments or
I
concerns?
wasn't here.
You weren't here, so you will not be voting. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries 3-0 with one abstention. Next item we have is March 10th special commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve that one?
Second.
It's been moved and moved and seconded to approve the March 10th, 2016 commission meeting minutes, and I did not get to that meeting until the last 30 seconds in time to hear the adjournment, so I will abstain from this motion. Any further comments on this? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion passes 3-0 with one abstention. Next item we have is the lobbyist application demonstration, and we welcome James and his crew here to tell us all about it. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to give you this demonstration. We're really excited to be here and give you sort of a first look at where we are. If the commissioners hadn't had a chance to read the report for this month, one of the big elements is that in 2 weeks we're going to do what is the first alpha release, sort of functioning version of the application just for internal staff first, because we're at a point where we can go through and actually complete an entire filing, and we're going to take some samples and basically start doing entry to find out where there might be any deficiencies, things that fields that we've missed or don't have enough space to include all the information, that sort of thing. So we're pretty excited that we have what is essentially a kind of core functional application at this point. And we're about halfway through the project right now. So I want to turn things over to Kyle and Jim, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the project and the application as well before I do that. So the application that we currently have is the oldest of the PDC's electronic filing applications. And I actually had to go look and see, because I was wrong about when it was developed. I thought it was a little later, but it was actually developed and released in February of 2002. So 14 years old. In 2007, a feasibility study was done to replace it because it was already identified in 2007 that it was woefully out of date and problematic. And that didn't go anywhere other than the feasibility study. Just as a point of reference, the feasibility study concluded that it was going to cost somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million to replace the application and 12 to 18 months for developers working on it to do that replacement back in 2007. So here we are in 2016 and still faced with the same problems and even worse problems. Chief among them is that the application that we have is just not compatible with most modern computers without people jumping through a whole lot of hoops and crossing fingers and just hoping it works to even get it to work. And we actually have people reverting from electronic filing to paper filing because the application doesn't work for them. And then second is that even though it's an electronic application, we don't actually take all of the data elements off of what's electronically filed and make them available. When I first got here at the PDC, we were actually printing electronically filed monthly lobbyist reports, and folks were hand data entering them into our database. And we corrected that shortly after I got here so that we were doing that piece of it electronically, but there's still a lot of information we just don't collect. You can look at the images, but that's the extent of it. So back in November, we kicked off, or actually it was last day of October maybe, we kicked off the project by inviting a group of lobbyists, reporters, and anybody who was interested to come in and just explore ideas with us about what this application should be like. And to start that conversation, we presented two different ideas to the group to kind of get the juices flowing and get the conversation rolling. And the two ideas were, one was, you might think about filing as a as-you-go thing. You do some lobbying activity, maybe you open up your smartphone and you enter it right in there, and you build up that collection of stuff, and at the end of the month you review it, maybe add some stuff and submit it. And it was very oriented towards mobile type devices. And then the other idea was more filing as an activity. Maybe think about doing your taxes, where over the course of the year or for lobbyists the month, you collect up all the information, but then you sort of sit down with everything and fill it out. And I was really excited about the mobile idea and thought, this is slick and I would really love this. And people overwhelmingly loved the idea of a TurboTax type model where you walk through the various pieces, that filing is an activity where you collect up your information and do it all right there. So based on that and lots of other feedback, we had some core functional pieces that we knew we needed to do. And one was that TurboTax model or approach to doing filing. And then a few other really key things that came out that were big items were, one, let me just carry forward a filing from 1 month to the next with all the information. I can edit it because a lot of people have almost the same thing month over month over month where they want to just change a few things. And let me import information that I'm collecting up in other lists. A couple others that were a little bit lower down. We have quite a few filers that file through folks that are basically accountants for them that do the filing process. And so we have folks that basically make them keep 15 different usernames and passwords so they can log in for each one of the people that they're filing for, rather than letting them set up individual organizations. And then the opposite of that, where we have people that maybe 3 different people have some responsibility in the filing, and so we make them share usernames and passwords between the group of them. And we wanted to make sure we addressed those and took a modern approach to usernames and passwords so that you can reset your own password and you can change your email address and all those hurdles that we run into with most all of our other applications. So during November and December, the team did some pilots of the technology to sort of figure out what was feasible before we came back with an approach about how we were going to do the application. And then starting in January, we solicited folks that were in that initial group, as well as people that expressed interest, to say, do you want to be part of this actual project with us and make a commitment to hang in there for 6 months to come and meet with us every 2 weeks, as much as you possibly can. And so we got, I think, 7 total. We have a core of 4 group of folks that either come in person or participate online that I wanted to specifically point out, and that is Ryan Hall, Karen Lang, Debbie, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Gilot, thank you, and Al Audet. And they are here regularly or on the video chat with us and providing amazing feedback. And then every 2 weeks after that meeting, we send out a summary of sort of what we learned through that process and what we're going to work on next. And then some of the other folks that are participants have just been providing feedback via email that's also been really valuable and have helped us a lot through this process. So we meet every 2 weeks. The group comes in, we do a demo of what we've worked on, we talk about what's the next most important thing to address. We make a commitment about what we're going to work on. We send out a summary email about this is what we're going to work on and this is what we're going to demo next time you come in. And folks come back in and we roll through the process again. And so we've been doing that since January. So what we have to show you today, as you're looking at the application, just keep a couple things in mind. One, we haven't worked on any of the visual styling because we're trying to make sure we get the core functionality of the application down before we start going and styling elements. Otherwise, it ends up doing rework when we make changes to the application. And there's a lot of language elements that we're working on. Something that we found out really early on is here inside our office, we talk about things in a particular way. And so the person or organization that's ultimately benefiting from the lobbying activity, that's the shortest English language I can come up with to say that, we call them employers. The lobbyists call them clients. Very different terminology. And the employers don't call themselves clients. So we're working on terminology a lot, and we're working on some ideas to change the terminology in the application based on the context that you're operating in. But for now, you're going to see lots of terminology like employers, groups, and all of those things are going to change as time goes on. So just keep in mind that the terminology is pretty rough. The styling, not much has been done at all because we're working on the core functionality of the application. But Jim and Kyle are going to walk you through the application and point out some of the places where we're really trying to focus the design around what our lobbyist community is trying to get out of the application, and then also focusing the way we're collecting the data around making disclosure as easy as possible so we can make all that information readily available on the back end when we do the new query system, which is the next major project that we have coming down the line. So we're prepping things so all that data will be available so that we can do a great job implementing the query system. And in fact, some of this application development has led us to a point where we've learned some really interesting tools that we're going to apply probably to the query system as well. So without holding things up any longer, I'm going to give you Jim Coleman and Kyle Veldhuizen, and they're going to walk you through the application.
Did you want to see if we had anyone here that wanted to talk?
Oh yeah, thank you, Jim. So, do you want to add anything, Debbie?
I would just second what you were saying about how good the staff is, because these three have worked really hard on this and with our input and to change things every week so that it's better and better. And it's very interesting to me to work on this because I never filed electronically before. So I'm anxious that this is going really good. I think it'll be easy for people to do. I think.
Thank you. And to echo what Debbie, to tail on to what Debbie just said, that as a programmer, I'm the technical lead of this project, and Kyle is the main programmer that works with me. And then we have some others in the team that help out. But having Debbie and having Al and Ryan and Karen's involvement has been valuable. They bring a lot to the table. It's easy for us to work on this, and we see the world through our eyes. And then they come in and they look at it and open up a whole different dimension. So, Kyle, why don't we get started and show them? You want to go through the very beginning of registering a new user from the very start?
Yeah.
Okay, what we've tried to do, with this app is try to make, and James talked about it a little bit, but we've tried to incorporate a lot of the elements that people are already used to when you use any other kind of internet app, whether it's eBay or whether it's Facebook or whatever. There's ways that people get used to doing things, whether it's changing your password or inputting your data. So we're going to point out some of that as we go, and then some of it I think will be pretty self-apparent. Starting with the login procedure, if you're a new user, how you would go in and create an account and get email verification and the whole thing. So why don't you walk us through this, Kyle? Come in as a new user.
Yeah, so we're coming in as brand new lobbyists, and we never had an account before, so the sign-up process is pretty similar to a lot of other websites you go to. You type in the username and the email address, and then your email with a link that you click on to confirm your account.
Do you want these lights off too? Is that easier?
So for those, in case someone's watching and can't see the screen, Kyle has input the username and an email address as a new user that's never used the system to get into what we call the Access Hub portal.
And on our new website, there'll be a place, it'll be readily apparent as a new lobbyist user where you're going to go to find this.
That's correct. Yes. So then he gets a message that says a welcome message with further instructions has been sent to your email address. And I think we've all seen this type of thing before on another site. So he's opening his email, and here comes the email that says, thank you for registering at Access Hub, and it gives you a link to click so you can go in and confirm your account. And when you get in there, it's going to ask you to reset your password, because what you get is just a temporary one-time password that expires. So Kyle will now go in and he'll input his password. And there's more they can do in their account settings, which we'll get
And
into.
before you jump off of here, it might be worth saying that all the functionality that you're seeing about checking is your password weak or strong, confirming that the two passwords match, it's a lot of really hard work to do security well. We didn't have to do any of that. We're using the same technology platform that we're doing the new PDC website on. And so we're basically learning the tool set at the same time that will allow us to do continuous development on the website also. And we get all of this added functionality for free, including the part about emailing you a temporary password and handling all of that low-level work.
Yes, which has made development a lot easier. Okay, so where are we at, Kyle?
So we've created the account, and now when we go back to the home page, you can see that there's not much here at this point, but at this point you're into Access Hub, as we call it, and eventually this is going to be a hub, so to speak, for a lot of different other different applications. And so you might be coming here to e-file, you might be coming here to use a different application, whatever it happens to be. And so we kind of created it in a step approach where if you only need to do as much as you need to do to get to a certain spot. And so since we want to e-file, we have to register as an e-filer. So you can click this link. And this is where we can fill in our additional information, our first and last name and contact information.
So this is to register as an e-filer to use the system. It does not correlate to anything that we currently use, like an L1 or anything like that, which we'll show you that later. This is just to go in and create the profile that gives them access to that specific part of the Access Hub application so they can follow. Did I say that right, James? Kyle and I have only been here 8 months, so we're still learning all this terminology ourselves as we go.
So once you have your e-filer account, now you can see on the right there's additional options. And this is kind of where we're getting into what James was talking about, is kind of abstracting the person from the entity that's responsible for doing the filing. And so we call the lobbyist firm, is what we've kind of defined it as, and what we're going to tune the wording as we talk to the lobbyist, is the individual or entity that's responsible for doing the filing. And so That way, you can set up that firm or that organization, and then other users can come and create those accounts, register as an e-file, and then be added to those organizations. That way, you can have multiple people managing the filings.
So he's going to register as a lobbyist firm by filling out this information here. And there's some, you're going to start seeing kind of what James was talking about, a little of the language that we use in the app. Once he kind of gets through here, you're going to start seeing where he's added to, you're going to see terms like group and whatnot. And those are terms that don't get hung up on those as we go through, because those are going to change. Those are just kind of default terminology of the application right now.
So,
And that's where we're working with our lobbyists.
so in the beginning there, if you're an individual lobbyist, you're gonna understand that lobbyist firm is where you go also?
Nope.
Right.
And so this is one of the things that came out, I think 2 weeks ago when we met with the lobbyists, is that, and you'll see some of what are called conditional fields later on in the application, where we can ask the question, are you an individual lobbyist or a lobbyist firm? And then based on what they select, we just change the phrasing of the question. Ultimately, probably anybody that's getting paid technically has a business license and is operating as a business and probably would fall under what we would call a firm, but nonetheless, they see themselves as an individual lobbyist. So we want the terminology to work for what they're doing.
So once you've registered as a lobbyist firm or an individual lobbyist, you're brought to this lobbyist dashboard, and this is what we're calling it. And at this point, you can't file because you haven't added any employers or clients. And so at this point, then we can add an employer.
And by adding an employer here, if you look over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the third box down. This is a help box that will be on anytime you're on a page where you need to do something. We're going to have a global help box over on the right that tells you what this page is, so you know what you're there, what you're supposed to do. So for now, and I will also say that a lot of those blocks don't exist on the site right now because as programmers, it's not our job to write those. We're putting a mechanism in there to where Lori or some other PDC staff can easily go in and update that anywhere through the application and change the help or change the page descriptions. But it came out on here, our lobbyist group told us that this page is what we call it in the group, formerly known as the L1 form. We're collecting that same data and that same information on this form. So it does roughly correlate to the L1. We also have inline help. Kyle, if you can mouse over the little question mark. We only have it on this page right now just to show you. Again, it's something that Lori will be able to go through. She can go through and assign help to any page, any input area throughout the app. She can assign help to it and write whatever is appropriate. But if you mouse over one of those, you get a little pop-up box that will tell you just a little bit of help about that area you're in. So if you'll have the box on the right to help you through the whole page and let you know what it is, but then you can get granular help too as you move through it if you have any question about what you're supposed to input.
Another thing we focused on when we were doing these forms is only showing them what they absolutely need to fill out. And so if you notice on these questions here, if they select no, then that's all I have to do. But if they select yes, then they have additional questions to fill out. So they're not bogged down by all these options that they may or may not have to fill out.
I think we've all used online forms that drove us nuts because they're 5 pages long and you make a mistake or something, the page reloads and you got to start all over again. So we're kind of working on making sure that does not happen. We want a very good user experience. So we use a lot of those conditional fields and whatnot to keep the form as compact as possible. So they can go through here and they can select everything that's on this form. Did you want to talk about the agents?
Yeah, so the agents going back then too, if they have several agents in the lobbyist, if it's a firm or an organization, they can select the individuals that may be doing the lobbying for that particular client or employer, or if it's just an individual lobbyist, then they can select themselves.
And those agents will automatically populate into the form. They don't have to add them. the agents can be added, they go in through the app like anyone else would, and they can register and add themselves in and associate themselves with that firm, and then as you move through the app, it'll automatically pull them in. Same with employers, which you'll see when we get to that point.
So if they have 3 employers, they fill this out where you're going through areas of interest and those other, how much you get paid.
Yeah, they would fill one out for each employer, and then they would appear on the list right here. And now that we have filled one out, it has been certified by the lobbyist, but it hasn't been authorized by the employer. And so I'm going to jump over to a different browser here. And this is the dashboard of the lobbyist employer or the client. So if we refresh this, you can see that this new relationship that I've been setting up, this client lobbyist relationship, now has appeared there, the Kyle Lobco. And you can see that it is not approved. So as the employer now, or the client, I can click edit, and I can come in here and I can review this information that the lobbyist just submitted. Now keep in mind, like James was saying, it's not formatted very pretty, very nice yet. But they can come through you, they can review the information and verify everything is correct. And if it's not, they can deny it and send the lobbyist a message. And they'll get that instantly in their email.
And who has access to that message that's being sent?
Only it's sent via email, and so it goes back to the lobbyist that filed the report. And it might be, we didn't agree to this amount of compensation, or maybe you just made a mistake, or you spelled something wrong.
Right. But that gives us a good check where the employer can verify. And then the employer will come in here and approve it, and they will type, this is like the electronic signature thing here, where they have to type specifically, I certify to prove to us and to everyone who might be interested that they actually read this and they're certified this. So that's what Kyle is doing now, and that'll take us.
And if I can, just, the current analog to this is that for each employer, the lobbyist fills out the L1 form, they sign it, then they mail it or take it by hand to the employer, and then the employer signs it, and then they send it in the mail to us, and then we scan it and data enter it, and then go into the application and mark it as done. And until they've waited for all that to happen, they can't file, because technically they can't file on behalf of their client until they have completed that process. So this takes what is days worth of shuffling things around down to potentially a few minutes.
So now we're back to this is the employer dashboard. Yep. And then you can see where it was now approved. There we go. Now you can see here in the box that says employers, you can see where it has now been marked approved.
So now at this point, now that we have an approved employer, we can go ahead and create a filing. And this is, like James was saying, it's analogous to the L2 filing, the monthly filing report that they have to do. So here you can come in here and choose the reporting period that you would like based off of that registration that we just did with the employer.
And these reporting periods are selected. They are only reporting periods that are available for you to file in. So from now through the end of the biennium, minus anything you may have already filed for. So it'll give you a list of only what you have available to file for. And when you click that, when you select it, you're brought into this screen. We call this the 7 tabs page, because we have 7 tabs across the top. And the reason we laid it out this way is because, again, I just talked about the pitfalls of a long 500-mile long form. We didn't want a kind of form where you have to submit it and walk to the next one and get a page load. And then if you want to go back 3 pages, how do you do it? Do you do it through the menu? Most people have clicked the back arrow 3 times, which can be problematic. So we came up with this structure with the help of our lobbyist group. And what this does is it lays everything out in a tabular format that corresponds to the L2 document as you walk through it. And this first one, this personal information is just automatically brought forward from your filer registration that we just did. If you were to change, let's say you were going to change your name or a change of address or something, then you would go back and edit that registration, and the next time you filed, that new information would appear in that filing. But this information for this filing will remain in historical, so it doesn't change if they change in the future. So we capture that information exactly as it is now, and they cannot, if they go into these fields, they can't modify it. The only way to modify it is to go in and modify it through your registration. We built it that way on purpose, just to keep this data, just to keep it as clean as possible. So you have your personal information at top, and now Kyle's going to kind of walk us through the personal expenses. We have the employer drop down here. Well, the employer is actually a auto select field right now. It's going to be changed to a drop down that will only show you your employers that have you've got that approved relationship we just showed you. Only those employers will show in here, and also yourself, because as you'll see when you walk through, sometimes you have to claim expenses or whatnot that you're your own versus an employer. Did you want to comment further? Okay. So you can add, if you need to add another, why don't you add another one there? We give you a choice where you can click a button and you can add another employer. So that way, if you have a whole bunch of employers with a whole bunch of different personal expenses, you can continue to just keep adding any number of these that you need to add. And then at the bottom, we have a box where you can sum your non-reimbursable personal expenses incurred by the lobbyist. So we'll just put something in there, and then we'll move to the next tab of the application, which is contributions, I believe.
And one other thing I'd like to point out, as you'll see as we go through these tabs, a big thing that the lobbyists expressed interest is importing data into these forms. And so as you can see here, we have options by all these forms for them to import their data, because a lot of them have expressed the interest that they collect the data throughout the month in Excel spreadsheets, and then they want to be able to just import it in. It makes it that much easier for them.
And one of the challenges with that is we found out the lobbyists all keep their information differently, like we all do. Some of us prefer Excel, some of us prefer Word. So what we have created are templates, which the lobbyists will be able to come in and download. These are the templates that are approved to use with this application. Then they will have those templates, they can add their data to those templates, and then they can import, and then everything will just automatically populate into the application. So now we're in compensation. Compensation's a pretty easy one, so we'll put in a couple of items there.
When you say now we're in compensation, that means you moved over to the compensation tab.
We moved, correct, thank you for that clarification. We moved over to tab number 2, which is compensation. At the top, you can see they do have the ability to import compensation. You'll see that. You may not see it all the way through this app because we may not have every single one configured yet, but it's there.
So something we haven't noticed, you haven't been saving any of this.
Right, we haven't
Worried
saved it.
about that. You didn't save the last page.
At some point, the employee or employer can save if they're comfortable doing that, or if they fear a computer crash or something. There is a save button at the very bottom, and they can save it at any time and then go back in and re-edit it. But you don't have to save it. You can just move through. All of this is one big 500-mile form. It's just cut into 7 pieces that overlay in the tabs. So it's not necessary to save it. I personally, when I go through even a test, I save every other tab or two. So I'm an old guy and I
Did you
just know
mention that it's
computers
auto
will
saving when you do that?
crash. James just pointed out again, I just said I'm an old guy, so I save everything. It does autosave. As you go through, as you do any action in here, do we actually see the pop-up on the bottom? I think we turned it off. There's a little pop-up that can pop up that tells you auto-saving, and it gives you a chance to revert back if you need to. So, good one, I forget about that. But that's one of the first things we did early on is put in autosave, so it's just always been there and I overlook it. But yes, if there is a computer crash or something bad happens, you can go back later and you can go back to the last point, which was autosave, which shouldn't have been too far past where you got it when the computer crashed. Thank you, James. So now he's doing entertainment. You have type of occasion. Can you pull down? I don't know if they saw that. You have a pull down for occasion types, which are currently on the L2. Entertainment, reception, travel, lodging, and subsistence and enrollment and course fees. So they can select whatever type of occasion.
they've not done this before, where do they find how can they easily access, gee, what is it I need to be reporting by way of entertainment? What's my obligation?
There is basically a manual for filing that has all the very detailed information as well as references to the rules and laws that are behind all of that. And then again, you'll see that on this page, the global help on the right hasn't been added to the page yet, but each page will have global help, and then each of the individual fields will have the small help icon that describes what goes in that field as well. And maybe a subtle point that could have been missed when Jim was describing how that help system works is that right now, if the language in one of our applications isn't very good about explaining how to do something, and Chip or Jennifer or Lori get a call about that and they go, wow, this is really hard to understand. They create a ticket that then goes to IT, where we go into the source code of the application and have to make changes and go through a test cycle and do all those things. And even if we have time, if we're not busy working on a project like we are now, that's potentially a couple weeks worth of work. In this application, Lori or Chip or Jennifer themselves can go into essentially the website editor, which is the same as what we're using for our website that they'll already be experienced at editing, and they can modify that help text in 5 minutes. And they can save it, and they can do it in the test site if they want and save it and look at it, and they can hit go. So it really puts a lot of power in their hands to help filers understand what they need to do.
Did you all discuss that just as you get to a tab that something would pop up that says, if you're a lobbyist with regard to entertainment, this is what you need to report, or that there's a link that takes them to what that is?
The global help for the page, as well as the individual help on elements, can have links included in them. And so if at any point we decide that a link to a reference is appropriate for that, then the link can be added in right there. In terms of things like sort of more prompting people for help, one of the things about the lobbyist application that's really different, particularly from things like the F1, is most of the folks that are doing lobbyist filing become experts at doing lobbyist filing because they're doing them once a month rather than doing them once a year, so you don't have that whole year to forget about it. And often they're supporting large numbers of clients as well. And so we have one lobbyist who can't use our electronic filing application because the biggest form we have allows for 33 clients, and they have 34 clients. And then we have folks that are professional filers, essentially accountants, that then are doing it for, they might do 20 filings every single month. And so we wanted to have a good balance of allowing experts to get in and do the work quickly and still having all of the help that's available if they choose to use it so that they can get instruction as they go.
I think your question really points out both the importance of the team working with lobbyists now, and then when it's sort of a more finished product, working with some people who really don't know anything to see. Because I can imagine that I might feel more comfortable printing out the manual and having it next to me the first time I went through the thing, but I can imagine that the third time I go through it, I probably don't need that manual anymore. And there's probably a way that we can link over or provide the drop-down information that takes care of both of those populations.
One of our goals we're working toward, also to help with that question, is we are working toward turning this over to internal testing very, very shortly. I think April 4th. And the reason we want to do that is to get some of those eyeballs internal and start talking as a team about what type of help or support the end user may need too as they go through. And then once we get that done, then like Evelyn said, then turning it over and bringing in people who haven't really seen it, aren't really familiar with it, and having them walk through. So I also wanted to point out, we're on the contributions tab. Kyle has just been, I'm watching the clock here, so we're just kind of, while we're having this discussion, Kyle is just doing some of the data entry in the background. So we can get through this and show you some more features of this. But I wanted to point out that on the page, even the order of the forms and the order that things are laid out have been worked out very carefully between us and our lobbyist group. So there's consistency. At the very top, you have itemized contributions. We think that that's what everyone would expect to do is they get their itemized contributions in there, and then whatever is left, obviously, is a non-itemized contribution. So even the way this has been laid out and the fields within that workflow has been worked very carefully with our group, and we've listened to a lot of what they've had to tell us with how they currently go through it and how they would like to go through it in the future. So Kyle's continuing to go through the tabs. Now we're on advertising and political ads. We combined these two into one tab just to we didn't want 50 million tabs across the top, and they were both rather short. So Kyle will input a little bit there. Do you have anything to fill in space, James? Okay. So now we'll go over to other.
One thing you can point out that you'll notice also is on each one of the forms, there's a checkbox at the bottom that says nothing to report, because one of the things we want to do is help people know that they didn't miss a section. And so if you don't fill out anything for a section, we'll give you a warning that says this has stuff that still needs to be filled out, or you can just say nothing to report. On the old forms, we actually made people fill things out and put in zeros rather than just letting them leave things blank. And so we want to just give them the option to say, I don't have anything, let's move on.
Actually, James, the programmers have discussed this a little more. And I thought you were in that discussion too, and you may have been, but we were also looking at the possibility of when you go into a tab, having that at the very top. Do you have anything to report for contributions? Yes, no. That's all you would see. And if you say no, you move to the next tab. If you say yes, then everything would appear on there. So that forces you kind of, as you go through, you have to address that in each tab. Yes,
so I had a question. One of the are most of the people either making the reports or making expenditures to or from things in the state of Washington?
That I don't know what the mix is there.
Because I always love those pull downs when you have to find the state of Washington, which is obviously 3 pages below on the bottom line. And maybe we could make it a default because.
No, that's a great piece of feedback, and it probably is. And also, when folks are selecting their own address, as well, is that Washington is the default, and that's probably a very easy thing to do.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of discussions about what the default value should be, because I'm kind of a UI guy, so I'm very sensitive to exactly that. As you don't want to scroll through a list. I don't like it when I go somewhere. I'm from the United States, and I got to pull down a drop list and go through 52 entries to get to. In this day and age, you can go through an IP and figure out where someone is and put the appropriate country in there. So that will be done. So now he's going through, and now he's finishing up with his L2. And the nice thing we have here, this is now a completed L2, which the lobbyists can then go through the 7 tabs on the bottom, and they can review everything they put in for each one. But then we thought at the top, we'd make an easy way for them to get their total. So at the very top, you see the top bar there where the mouse is hovering, your personal compensation, entertainment contributions. These are all the totals of what you have input thus far in your L2. And beneath it, we have another box where we summarize it by employer, because most lobbyists will already have all this information. It's like you when you do your taxes. You already have all this stuff in front of you. You just have to go put it in. And then you want to verify that this figure matches this figure. So then we wrote this to where they can go through and they can get the totals. But some lobbyists may have 30 or 40 employers, and we don't want to push the L2 below the fold. We want them to still be able to access it. So when Kyle clicks on that, you can hide or unhide that. I think by default it's going to be hidden, and it'll say hide or unhide the summary details, and the lobbyists can then open that box and they can see all that information. And if they're more comfortable leaving it open, they can leave it open, or they can close it, and then they can check on that as they go through the app. If they want to check on something or make sure their totals are correct, they can go back and check that. So at this point, that filing is ready to go. But now we have, you say that, right? Thank you. But now, and we're not going to walk through this whole long thing again, but we have some really cool functionality. And we can't walk you through it because we're still developing it. But that is outside of import. I think the second or third most important thing that Debbie and our team wanted was the ability to file again next month, but not have to redo all that work because very little change. I only had 2 more contributions. Outside of that, everything was the same. So as you see on the screen, we've given them the ability to choose their reporting period, which is April 1st to 30th, but then they can bring forward an existing filing. And when they select that, then they can get all the way down to the granular detail of what do you want to carry forward? Do you want to carry forward the whole thing? Or do you only want to carry forward compensation and expenditures? So they can go through that, and when you click submit, which we're not going to do because we had some field changes and we have to button that up. But this was actually developed a long time ago. It works real well when it works. And you click submit, it will populate that filing for you. At that point, you're all done. You just go through. They can change, after they do that, if they want to change every field, they can go back and change every field, or they can just change the 1 or 2. They can review it, click save, and that 5 minutes, easy and done. So that was another thing that we were able to accommodate early on for our group. And it's a very valuable functionality. Are there any questions or anything you'd like to see more detail of or see again?
Did you hear from the lobbyist group any need to help with multiple reporting entities? Do they report to other governments, other?
No, we didn't hear anything about being able to do that.
Okay. So look, if they have to report to, if they lobby at a municipality or other places, it's not a high priority for folks that there be integrated data or a way to streamline that.
No, we certainly didn't hear anything about that. One of the features that if somebody wanted to be able to generate some data like that, though, that did get asked for, is to be able to provide summary reports. And so that I can see either at the end of the year or I can see across all of the clients that I'm supporting a summary report of that information.
And one thing we're keeping in mind too as we develop this is that this is publicly accessible because the public will need to be able to come in and they will need to be able to pull up these filings that are done and then the ancillary materials that are, like in one case right now we're allowing file attachments which came out of the last meeting and we did that, Debbie. It's where they can attach lists and they can attach files. But this all has to be publicly accessible. So we're keeping in the back of our mind and we're going through and looking at it from a lobbyist viewpoint, but also from the public viewpoint.
That's actually a really good point that Jim brings up about the approach that we chose. The technology tools that are under this, like I said, are also what's driving our new website, which is technically a content management system. It's meant for publishing information. And so as lobbyists create an L2 filing or the equivalent, they're actually creating content. And when they submit that to the PDC, they're actually publishing the content in the same way that we would publish a new page on our website, which means instead of the normal way that people write applications like this, where they say, let's write the application and collect up all this data, and then afterward figure out how to make that information available. We use the content publishing system right from the start. And so when people file, they're actually creating the publicly consumable information that's going to get pushed out there. And the minute, this is in a safe state right now, it hasn't been submitted. So technically it's not published, but the minute it is submitted, it becomes published. And a search on the site will search through every single word that's in that piece of published content. So even if you looked at for the name of somebody that was at a reception, or I noticed the Olive Garden was in here, and you searched for the Olive Garden, you would see that a reception was held at the Olive Garden. And all of that is functionality that's just delivered basically out of the box because of the system that we're using to drive this. So we really are focused on that making the information available aspect.
James, does that happen before the employer signs off and says it's accurate?
No, and in fact, you can't even generate a filing until the employer. I should be careful about how I answer that because part of the process is the registration, which the employer signs off on, but the employers don't sign off on the monthly filings. So the lobbyists simply submit those, at the end of the year, that information is reconciled, and right now the employers have to submit an L3 form which reconciles all the information that's been accumulated over the year. And we are also reevaluating how we approach that, because the most important piece of feedback about that we got was, as lobbyists, we're compiling all this information up and providing it to the employers so that they can look at it, fill out the form, basically say, I agree, and fill out the form. Couldn't you just generate the report of that information for me so that I can give it to them and they can reconcile it, review it, and submit it, and to make it much easier for that process to happen? And a really big key for us at this point, of course, the commissioners know that we don't have mandatory electronic filing for lobbyists right now. And so we want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. We're really hopeful. We know we won't get everybody, but we're really hopeful that we're going to get a large number of folks choosing to electronically file, because we just make it so much easier for them to do the right thing.
And on that point, what's the process you all envision for letting people know how much easier this is? So all the folks who are still filing hard copy, what kind of outreach do we do?
Yeah, so one, we know we're going to do a big rollout celebration, because this is going to be a big deal. We haven't planned beyond that at this point, though, but we know that it's going to be a lot of work to get out there and let folks know, especially people that have tried electronic filing and given up on it because it didn't work for them. We want them to know that there's something new to try out there.
Anything else? What's our expected launch date on this? Is it July?
End of June. So my initial promise was second quarter, and we are still feeling like we're on track for it. Part of the approach that we've taken in doing this is trying to make sure we're doing the things that are really important first. So a piece of information that kind of got glossed over was about receptions and participants and amounts spent. We'd really love to have a way to import participant lists and have all of those data elements carried out separately, and you could sum the amounts on the participants and all that great stuff. But that's a really complex feature to implement, and we know that we don't need that as an absolute minimum to get this application going. And so the way it's implemented right now is you can just paste in one giant list, or you can attach a file. If we can finish things up and that as a feature gets added last, great. But if we reach the end of our 6 months and we don't have that feature, we still have a great functioning application that we can go live with, and we will, and get moving on to the next project, because we know we want to get moving on the query system. And so that's why we're taking this approach of saying, get an application that functions and does what it's supposed to do, and move on to the next step, and then start refining and adding the individual items that are sort of, wouldn't it be nice, as we go.
And that was one thing in the initial meeting we had with the group, is that they really stressed to us is they wanted an application. When we give them an application, they want an application that works. They don't want an application that has a bunch of fancy things that may or may not work.
Anything else?
Great progress. Looking forward to seeing the next steps, and then obviously the implementation at the end of June.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Great report.
Thank you.
Great job.
Can we turn the lights back on?
Excuse me, coming to.
Yeah.
Now, a little bit ahead of schedule, do you want to go into our strategic plan discussion, or do you want to take a break?
I'd like to go into the strategic plan unless we take a first break.
Okay, so first, your strategic plan copy is attached to the staff reports under executive director. So that is at page 167 of the materials.
When it works, it works wonderfully.
It's nice when it works. Yes, I agree. So, I mean, you all sort of know where we've come from on this strategic plan. We had our work session at the end of January to come up with a list of features and goals that we wanted to work on. And we boiled them down into a strategic plan that has, scrolling it through on my screen when I have it right here. Sometimes paper's easier. This has 6 goals on it. They range from goals that are very outwardly focused at the beginning to finally the 6th goal is more inwardly focused on some of our management tasks and efforts. The goals were developed during our work session, and so were the objectives. So the objectives are sort of the A, B, and C that are underlined under each goal. Those came out of our process of putting dots on our pages and trying to define which were the ones that were the highest priority for us for this period of time. And then under those, we had developed a number of sub-points in our work session, and those sort of became the action items. One of the things I did when I was pulling all of that information into a plan was to realize that we had a whole lot of stuff that we wanted to do, and we probably were not going to get it done in our 6 to 12 months that we were hoping. So I expanded the plan to an 18-month plan, which will actually end up fitting better with our performance development plan process anyway. So we have short-term actions, which are things that we would hope to accomplish within the period of now through the end of June. Medium-term actions, which are things that would be completed by the end of 2016, and longer-term actions that would carry over into the beginning of 2017, with the idea that we would be through this plan by June of 2017, which would be the time that we would start a new performance development plan cycle, and we would start a new strategic plan cycle, and it would also coincide with a new fiscal year. So calendar-wise, we end up with a good alignment. I am not quite sure how you want to move through discussing the plan. Do you want to take it goal by goal and talk about how this is going to work?
So, I said this when we met. This is this is a work plan.
Yes,
It's not a strategic.
that's correct.
And some of these goals, and and all of it's fine. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to mislead anybody. When we talk about a strategic plan stretches out over a period of time. Work plan is really more annually focused, and these are good goals and good objectives. And I'm comfortable with the fact that some of them go on for more than a year because I think it's realistic that way. So it's a logical way of proceeding. Some of them overlap too, so just maybe if you just walk through them, and I guess if we talk about them once, we don't have to talk about them twice.
Fair enough. Yeah, we hope so. And first I'd say you're right. This strategic plan, and I was talking to staff about it, in many ways it sort of has more of the feature of a to-do list than where is the organization today, where does the organization want to go, how are we going to get there. I think for right now this is what we need because we have a lot of stuff to do. We have some things we need to catch up on, and part of it is making up for some deficits that occurred first during the recession with cuts and layoffs, and then second with some workload that backed up and built up. So I think this is a good place to be, but I do think that what we will need to do when we feel like we're on top of the actions, at some point we are going to need to have a discussion about what's the big picture and how do we start lining ourselves up so that we're ready for moving wherever that direction may be. We've got some stuff coming up just in our environment. You know, we are likely to have an initiative on the ballot that talks about public financing of elections. Things like that would rock our world in a big way. So I'm quite comfortable with right now having a robust to-do list to sort of get ourselves organized and oriented. But I think you're right. Eventually, we'll need to be looking at a much bigger picture.
Just to follow up on Grant's point a little bit, one thing we might want to do is add some metrics or measures to these. So when we talk about making the system work better for the regulated community, helping them succeed is our primary goal, not catching them when they fail. So what are some measures we might want to put in there? So how many people right now fail to file X and that we have to have hearings about? Do we want to try to bring that amount down numerically or percentage-wise? Or how long does an average enforcement action of a certain type take, and are we going to try to make that 2 months shorter so that we can have some more concrete ways to look back at these work items to see if they made a measurable difference?
I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the challenges here is feeling a little bit of the chicken and egg sort of situation where we don't really have things we're measuring right now. So I think the first step is figuring out what are the things that we should be measuring so that we can do that. And then we can start, doing some really good metrics of, how long is it taking us to do this? Why is it taking us that long? Shouldn't it take us this amount of time? And then some goal setting.
Right. And if we could articulate a little more, what's the problem we're trying to solve in each of these. So when we talk about, for example, penalty collections, doing a better job, if we looked at that and said, well, it's really only X amount, or we really only have this pile of folks who are repeat in this way, and that's what we should target. We have a sense then, to Brad's question, where we're trying to get, even though it's not the 30,000 foot level yet, at least in these, we're saying, this is what we've identified as why we need to focus on it, and have we in fact gotten there yet, or partway there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less theoretical and more actualized.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess my request on that would be, as we move through this process and as we move through this year, if you see these areas, don't hesitate to point out and say, this would be a really good area for us to be measuring, or this would be an excellent place for us to get a metric. Because I think that is one of the, certainly one of the challenges that I have coming into this is trying to figure out where that is. And I think we're all, at the staff level, a little bit trying to figure out where do we have good information, where are we in transition, and how do we lock that up a little bit tighter. I feel we're sort of undefined right now, but getting better. So in moving through this, the goal one was to focus on the timeliness of the services we're providing, and also the focus on the customer service orientation. And what that means is there are things that we do that have been not as quick and responsive as they need to be, particularly in the enforcement arena. There are things that we do where we provide a very high level of customer service, particularly the filer assistance services that Jennifer and Chip provide. But are we overtaxing them? We just have 2 people, and I know at this time of year when they've started to send out the reminders of filing the F1s, Chip was coming to the like 1,000 emails he needs to work through to answer. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at as we move forward is, do we need more people in that position, or do we need more flexibility? The enforcement team, one of their reasons for clearing through a lot of the old files as quickly as we can is so that they're freed up to take over some of those calls that come in, especially during the summer, during the election cycle, and help out so that we're not so siloed in terms of, you do filer assistance, I do enforcement.
Good. That's a great example, I think, of something we've talked about. So this is a perfect time to be doing some measure of what people are struggling with.
Yes.
So do we have a way that Chip and Jennifer and others who are helping everybody are tracking what it is people are struggling most with? And then can we be putting in our plan, prioritizing, fixing those things?
Yes.
You know, is it, right, what's the cause of, why so many people need to call at this time of year and need help? And
Exactly. So there's two ways. One is, one of the pluses of being small is it's not hard to get together and talk. So actually, Chip and Jennifer and Laura get together informally quite regularly to say, this keeps coming up, what do we do about it? But we're also building in a couple of times where they're going to have a more formalized review. I'm looking at my calendar because I put everything onto a calendar too. So for goal 1B4 and 1C5, we have a twice a year customer service review to collect up all of that data of, 1B4 is on page 169. And it's review forms and filing documents. Where do we see people struggling now? Build a list of priorities for review and fix. And that's something that we'll take up. We'll set a more formalized twice a year customer service review, and one will occur in July.
And Evelyn, I guess, the question for me is, are we giving them the tools to be collecting that now at the peak time when people are struggling? Is there some way that they've got categories that they're tracking or types of issues? So when you do have that download later, you've got the data from this? Because this is your best time of year for that.
Oh yeah, this is the time to collect that information. No, we don't have anything that is that's a tool like that that would allow them to collect information. And I think I would turn to them and ask them. It may be that we have to figure that out this time around, like what would be more helpful to set up for the next time around. It may be that it's more keeping notes in a pad of paper than having something that is more tool-like.
I think even just to get started on everybody trying to collect the information at this point, in addition to being responsive to what people are requesting, so that you see what you need.
Exactly, yeah.
It wasn't too long ago that a pencil and pad of paper were tools.
We're tools.
So,
They're tools that I use, certainly. So I would consider them tools, but they don't sound very sexy, do they? Yeah, no. You'll notice that the other piece that I had set for the twice year review was on 1C5, and that's on page 170. And it's establish a review system for issues that recur from calls and email requests. And that we'll, concentrate on that also in July, because we'll have just gone through the lobbyist issues and the filer financial form system. So I will say a lot of this, a lot of what we've built in here, which I think will be really valuable, is sort of getting our tools and our statistics in place where we don't have them already. Let's see then. Goal 2 is the PDC, which is on page 172. The PDC will provide effective and impartial enforcement of disclosure laws and will help the regulated community comply. This goal is both with some elements of sort of implementing our some of the process improvement work that we've done to tighten up timeframes and expectations on resolving complaints, and also to, where possible, be assisting people who must deal with us to comply. I would say a theme that runs throughout this is, and one of the things that came out of our work session was, don't make the PDC a gotcha tool. Try to get to the point where people can, if they're paying attention, and if they're not paying attention at all, it's going to be unfortunate for them. But if they're paying attention and trying to do it right and making the effort to contact us and work with us, then we want to make that as easy as possible, and we want to work with them rather than being in an antagonistic relationship. I would say that the enforcement team and the filer system people are doing that. There's a lot of back and forth. One of the things we're trying to work on is using the Fresh Desk application where we're putting all of our complaints in, finding ways that the Jennifer and Chip can then pick up a matter from that, interact with like a treasurer from a campaign to answer questions and figure out what's needed, put that information into the Fresh Desk ticket so that then when it's back to enforcement, they know, okay, you've been really working with our people and sorting out some of these problems. So we're not as concerned about the fact that you've late filed in the past, but we think that that's unlikely to occur in the future.
One thing we might want to think about, Evelyn, is integrating our rulemaking and legislative agenda into that section. Because one of the ways we want to help people be able to succeed is if the statutes are poorly written, or as in this year, we are trying to make it more consistent between in-state and out-of-state. So some of the strategies that we're looking to use in order to help people be more successful is diagnosing where the barriers are. And if those barriers are in rule or interpretation or statute, we're putting those in our agenda to try to address. So
Following up on that, we do an annual report,
Yes.
which is not a particularly useful document. We do it because we're obligated to by statute, I believe. You might actually make it a useful document by identifying these issues and talking about potential solutions. So we start creating a dialogue with the regulated community and with the legislature about how we might solve some of those things.
and that's part of the strategic plan.
That sounds, somewhat strategic.
Yeah.
But I just think that's a place where we could actually take a tool that take these issues and start talking about, here are the problems, here are several solutions, we're looking to get some input on these solutions, but here are some ways that we can go.
No, that's great. I mean, it's sad in a way that I'm thinking, what a radical thought to actually use our annual report to actually engage and get that kind of dialogue going. Because you're right. Normally, the annual report is just, we did this many, we had this many complaints, they were resolved within this time frame. It's kind of a
Ripping.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. The annual report is usually produced in the fall, but that would work out very well because a lot of the development of our sort of where are the problems and where are our solutions is going to be occurring over the course of the spring and summer. So that can work out really well.
It might be for each of these goals we have in here, you're going to look through and see, do we have internal process improvements we're making? Do we have rules we're proposing? Do we have statutory? So those tools to accomplish each of these goals. Because one of the things we've talked about is when we do all our work throughout the year, is our time focused and is our effort focused back to our strategic plan goals? So aligning those would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can take a look at that. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that looks like, but I'm sure there's a way to do that. And I would say too that with this document, some of the language is general. I mean, some of the language is, and it may just be a result of the role it's playing. Some of it's almost like, remember, this is the time when you're going to do these things. You're going to look at these things and discuss these things and make some decisions. So it may not, at this point, include what those decisions are, because this is really the document that says, you're going to set aside time and do these things and make sure that they are accomplished. And so I think that's a tension I'm feeling too, is that how much goes into the plan that's, we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E, as compared to you're going to come up with a system for handling this problem.
Yeah, I'm thinking more if you're the staff and you're looking through your priority projects here, clearly a priority for us during the year is rulemaking and legislative agenda.
Mhm.
So why is it a priority? Whose is it to do and what are we trying to accomplish with it? So if it's not in here, then we're not really aligning our staff efforts and our
Right.
focus to our outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Right, and we do have several items that are referencing the development of our legislative agenda for 2017. Just
And it's more here as a task and less as outcome.
it is a task, and I think that's so on 1A4 and 1B5. 1A4 is to start pulling the package ideas together in May, and 1B5 and 3B5 are budget building and looking at staffing needs. On this plan, it's more to make sure that happens rather than setting what the plan is or what the agenda is at this point. And part of the reason is that I certainly anticipate that the items that were on our 2016 legislative agenda are likely to carry through to 2017. But I think that is for you to decide in May and June of this year. Things may have changed. I mean, we may decide to wait on the mandatory electronic filing and see if we can persuade people to electronically file with our applications. We may decide, on some other priorities, and I don't want to prejudge what those are going to be because that's really your discretion. Moving down to goal 3, which is on page 173, is the PDC will use best practices in order to ensure fair and professional regulation, investigations, and enforcement actions. Again, this is more about setting expectations and deadlines to move work along faster. A lot of the focus is on our enforcement team. In fact, it's like all of it is really related to enforcement actions. And that's because we've had difficulty with cases getting stalled out. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I will say, and I'll say it here rather than in my staff report, as you know, the enforcement team has done a great job moving through cases. We've closed or essentially, moved through the complaint resolution or the case resolution to a good point for us of 23 cases since we last met. So we've got 30 active matters still in our books, and that's a really significant achievement compared to where we were last fall. So they're working hard, and we'll continue working on that.
So I had a question about the proactive enforcement activities.
Yes.
As I understand it, we've been resource constrained in that regard. Did we win the lottery? Did we? How are we going to fund this?
Well, the resources we have today are pretty much the resources we're going to have. So I don't think that there's a whole lot. We can't do much that requires more bodies. What we can do is probably a better focus on information, getting out to people. The new website is going to help us significantly with information about our enforcement efforts because we'll be able to load documents directly onto the website and make that a lot more clear. But we're really making the best use of things that are low cost or free because we don't have any additional funding. And I was saying to Commissioner Levinson a week or so ago, if I could get 3 more FTEs, we could do a whole lot more work. But as you heard this morning, it's sort of, we have a great IT unit, but it's 5 people. We have a wonderful communications unit. It's called Lori Anderson. So there are definitely barriers to us being able to do everything we want to do immediately.
Well, I'm just, as we get into this area here,
Tell me what you're looking at that's causing you some concern.
Well, we state that we're going to renew audits.
Yes,
Where are we gonna get the resources or the time to do that?
well,
I don't wanna
That's-
have things in the plan that we're not gonna do.
no, we're gonna do it. We're gonna start small. So that is, Kurt is going to start audits. He has a plan for picking up one race from 2015 in King County, probably one race from the Vancouver area, and probably one race campaigns from the Spokane area. We're gonna pick races that don't have 20 candidates in them, but we're gonna pick races that have a lot of activity. We'll request, and one of our pushes right now to get all of the cases that have been on our case list resolved is to make that time so that Kurt can do that. But it'll be small to start, and it may always be small. You know, the audit function is really important though for two reasons. I mean, one reason is to give us information about how things are working and how campaigns are really understanding what they're required to do, but also to send the message to the broader community that, you know, we have all these rules, we do actually expect you to follow them, and complaints generate a certain amount of ability to look at things and to check on them, but they don't cover everything.
Are we picking campaigns and IEs or both?
Right now, we're just gonna do local campaigns, either city council or county council. So it would probably cover IEs to the extent that there were any for those campaigns, yeah. Yeah, but the starting point is to say to the campaign, give us your information. And then we start tucking into it and see where that leads.
Our time's just about up, so do you wanna just go ahead with the other check goals real quick?
Yes, so the other goals are goal 4, that will have the capacity to address emerging trends and issues. And this has been more of an IT focus, but you'll see that there are times set or issues set also on designing meetings and finding some meeting time this summer for us to have a discussion about emerging issues in election laws. I keep a file on things that are, you know, developing, and the one that we were going to get back to this summer is on use of campaign funds for post-election expenses.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, that's one where I'd like to see another category there, because we are doing that, so being able to see the landscape and see if we can't get ahead of it in election laws is sort of a critical part of what we do. And that's, I know that's the intent, but it's not spelled out here as a priority for us.
I can do that, I can either move that over or put that in there. You look like you have another question.
Well, I've got some comments. This is a really long document,
It is.
and I worry that we are diluting what's important by having too many items, quite frankly.
I think that's very true.
I agree with that. At
So,
some point, people just throw their hands up and say, what is the point? I mean, our employees work, 8 hours a day?
Yes. Some
It's
more
not
than that.
like many of us who have worked a lot more than that, because it's the way it is. I'll be looking for another job.
I also know another thing. There's not one item on here that has the commission as the lead.
That's true.
So you guys can do it all by yourselves.
No, well, that's
Just,
not, that's
Just the
not,
eye candy of this operation. But quite frankly, you know, when you talk about emerging issues and things like that, it's really a policy role that
Mhm.
perhaps we could provide some meaningful input on. So you might give some thought to thinking about what the commission's role in these things are, because right now I see not one of them is listing the commission.
Well, let me assure you, I would be delighted to assign you some responsibility. I didn't have the sense that that was going to be a workable framework, but let me think about how I can make that happen.
Well, certainly as we start developing a list of issues that we think the legislature needs to deal with, that's typically something that.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that that's my responsibility to make sure it happens, and it's your responsibility to do the work on certainly coming up with ideas. We'll come up with ideas, but the decision on the final package is your decision.
But I would strongly, I guess, my suggestion of the chair would be to say that this is just, there's so much here that I just fear that by saying we're going to adopt this, all we're doing is saying we're not going to achieve a lot of it, and that's not fair either. And unless we want to format it and say some of these are longer term, we talked about this at the beginning, longer term than others, but that's my impression.
Well, I'll tell you, I agree with you. So when we came out of our work session in January, there was a big list of things that were priorities for the commission. And I've taken them and I've turned them into a plan. And it's dense. It is dense. I think we can do them. There's always a chance that we won't get to every item, but I think we can do them. But I would be quite happy to cut it down. You know, if you'd like to focus on the first 3 goals, or if you'd like, you know, whatever direction you want to give, I will do my best to craft a plan that does that.
Well, I think the goals are correct. I think you've stated them well. I just think that the time period for achieving them is, unless something, I mean, and I know things are changing and you're doing a great job of motivating people and getting things accomplished, and I want to compliment you on that. But absent having a much bigger, if the assumption built into this plan is that FTEs stay about the same and revenue stays about the same, even with outstanding management, I think you've got a pretty aggressive piece here, and maybe thinking about what the correct horizon is for accomplishing some of these things would be good, so that we know what, you know, as the old question, what are the 4 top things we're going to try to achieve in the next 12 months? What are the 4 things that we're going to do in the next 18 months or whatever? I haven't counted how many of them there are, but there's probably 30 items on here.
There's probably more than that.
And so that it dilutes what the real, I mean, we had an excellent presentation today on a very, 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 very high priority, which is delivering on a promise to improve our interface with the public and with the lobbying community, so the regulated community and with the public. And we're delivering that. We have other things to do. We're improving enforcement. We're speeding up. You know, we want to achieve a resolution of issues quicker. Then we have these systemic issues that we have to deal with. Chronic underfunding. Some places where the law is asking us, you know, the citizen action letter issue,
Yes.
which becomes a an administrative and regulatory nightmare. Those are the kinds of, there's some big policy issues that we have to have start a conversation about that with everybody. And so I just want to make sure that that doesn't get diluted by this daunting list. That's
I'd just like to remark that I think part of the issue here is we started out with a strategic plan that has morphed into a work plan.
Yeah.
So it's a hybrid. And it's trying to be all things to all people at all times, which we know is never a successful matter. And I think the commission needs to take responsibility for that, because we gave mixed messages to the staff, in my opinion. We told them we want a strategic plan, but we want every single thing in it. And I think part of that was because of pent up frustration and, maybe that's too harsh of a word, but pent up anxiety for everything that we've seen and the world has seen that's need to be done.
Yeah.
And hasn't been done, but is in the process of being done. So our top priorities, instead of being the 4 for 6 months and 4 for 12 months, ended up being 4 dozen for 6 months and 4 dozen for 12 months. And maybe we as a commission need to evaluate our direction to you. Because we need to confirm our priorities so that the staff has the direct direction that we're both on the same page
Yeah.
and it's clear and it's reasonable and it's doable. Because like Commissioner Bridges said, we don't want our staff all to be out looking for other jobs.
No.
We don't want to set them up for failure, and we do want things accomplished that are important to the commission as well as to the staff.
Okay.
Would it
should we
be
move
reasonable to set some time aside in April? I know April's a horrible month, but maybe the beginning of the commission meeting.
We might be able to do that. We might be able to do that. Let me also take a stab. Let me think about what you've said, because it's very, very helpful. And there may be, maybe I can come up with some different options too. But yeah, we will build some time in April to do that and figure out what we're doing.
Evelyn, don't redo this. I mean, I sincerely appreciate how much time you must have spent doing this when you could have been doing a bunch of other stuff that you have to do.
Thank you. But no, I won't redo. But what I'm thinking in the back of my mind is maybe there's a way of extracting out, things that are the highest priority from a medium priority and see what that looks like. So we've got everything in one document, but now can we manipulate it a little bit?
Well, a little bit different perspective I think I have is that this is a mix of goals, tactics, to-dos, right? So it seems, I think, a lot bigger than it actually, so if you look at some of the things, it's develop a standard format. It's not a, right, that's not a big picture.
That's a tactic rather than.
That's right. And so where I'm going is I don't want Evelyn and the team to lose, they've worked on how are we gonna get that goal done? What are some tactics, tools, steps, right? So scheduling work sessions is not a strategic plan, but it's a deliverable in
Yes.
this approach.
So from the background I come from, the strategic plans I'm used to will have the goals, the objectives, and then the action steps in it. So you have the complete picture. But yes, when you're at the action steps, you're into the to-do list, definitely.
So one thing I was thinking about is you could actually just sort of layer this so that you guys continue to have all of this detail for your work plans and for the performance objectives and all that, but that it's a higher level, a little bit more strategic piece that's really what the focus of this body might be, and that you don't feel like we're micromanaging down to this level of how is that gonna happen. So I don't think anybody's saying they disagree with any of the goals in here.
Oh, and I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is that, a concern, a very legitimate concern about within our current resources, let's make sure we're not overtaxing everyone and making it into something that's going to create a problem rather than a positive.
And the other thing I would just add is the question you often get when you do go ask for more resources is what would you do with them? So
Yes.
it's really helpful to be able to say, this is what, if only we had 2 more FTE, here's how we could be helping the regulated community more. We see these gaps here, this is what we're striving to get done. we don't have the capacity at the moment to do that. So going from the ideal to the realistic, but not losing track of where we're trying to get to and what the limitations are there.
Hard to have excellent customer service when your phone system is just one slight generation ahead of the rotary dial.
New phone system is on the list.
I know. It's sorely needed.
Okay, so we're gonna bring this back in April, do some work in the meantime, and then think about priorities. Okay, I can do that.
And the commission's responsibility in making that it's,
Okay, very good.
anything else? All right, well now we're 15 minutes behind. I'm glad we're 10 minutes ahead to start with. Would you like a quick break before we start? So we'll be back here at a quarter after. I'd like to make it 10 after if possible. Let's try for 10 after.
Sure.